missed last week's. We're just starting a whole new series of workshops, Isla, a new project on developing a series of games that could be part of Invention Universe, or could be a game that allows you to enter a portal on the website. You solve the game, you get into this this area that's for special members. Okay, that's the big picture. Anyone want to add to that big picture before we look at David's game specs?
No, I think it's right.
Okay, now let me share my desktop. And can you see now David's game ideas?
Yeah.
Okay. So just again, synchronizing, we want to develop a browser-based game that reflects our intern's experience. We want to use professional web development tools, make the code an example of advanced programming, and we want to follow a rigorous project management process. Get everyone on this team accustomed to projecting our development and then monitoring the progress of our development as we go along. And then secondly, we want the goal for this game is to enhance the build it yourself member experience. So it's got to some way tie into our website, so it makes our website more inviting, or challenges you to come back again and again and again to solve new games and get into new portals. Okay. So one way of specifically saying that, create a game that when beaten gives the player access to the build it yourself control. So then David suggested players must make their way through various rooms by delivering the correct value of or number to the answer door, where the problem for the room is stated at the top. However, there are enemies with a certain value that subtracts from your value when you hit them with numbers. Okay? Not exactly sure how to translate that, but I get the idea. It's a series of numbers challenges, and you have to, if you get the number wrong, you get some penalties. Puzzle element is in the mechanic of figuring out how to defeat the monsters with which numbers to end up with. Is there a game that's sort of similar to this? Here's an example. 4 to the 2 is minus 10. So you have a multiple choice. I say, okay, this example sort of lays it out. Okay, solution, pick up. Jacob, what do you think of this game spec that David has? Is this something that is reasonably doable?
Well, I think, I'm sure it would be, if we had, if we had a bit more experience with, with one of the game engines.
Mm-hmm.
There are game engines for, if you're talking about in-browser games.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to stick with open source tools, there are game engines that work on can that, and of course there's Scratch, I guess if you want to go that route, it's maybe a little bit difficult to do with just the tools that we have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wonder. Yeah.
I was going to say the multiple, and of course, we'd like to have really nice graphics, but it does complicated a programming task to and present A, B, C, or D, and each A, B, C, or D has an answer and a consequence.
Okay.
Is that one way of breaking the game down into a kind of a game engine, multiple choice, trivia game like question, like environment?
I suppose.
Okay. Something like that could be done really easily in Scratch, but we want to make this browser-based.
John?
Yes.
To me,
is this David?
A, B, or C, A, B, C, or D math question sounds more like a math test than a game. But
yeah. Explain how you this example evolving inside of a browser, not inside of Scratch or inside of a dedicated game player.
Well, I don't know. I don't have much experience with game engines that work inside of browsers. I'm sure we could learn that, though. I don't know.
I guess that's what you're talking about, Jacob. Well, Jacob,
Brent did link in something that looks pretty interesting. Brent, have you used this before? Okay, it does look pretty cool. It's first, this looks that looks like it would at least have maybe a smaller learning curve than most of their engines.
Mm-hmm. So, given our project goals, and then David's number puzzle platform, what would you recommend, Brent or Jacob, as the next steps? Should we each research a game platform, and or maybe we need to look at this example, the number puzzle platform, and try to break it down and what sort of things have to happen to make this a rich game, and then look at game engines and see how if they have the features that enable us to make this game into something really attractive. Good graphics, maybe a little bit of animation, sound effects.
I guess we would research the tools that we would use, as a logical first step. And I think the one that Brent linked to, just at first glance, I mean, I have not having tried it, but it really looks great. So that would be, I think, on the short list.
Okay.
And I suppose you could fall back to Scratch if we can't really find a suitable, better option.
Mm-hmm.
Would that make sense?
Good point, Brent. Very good point. Well, I'm not sure most, but surely we would like yourself to play well on iPads and Androids. Isla,
I think it would. I I think it would be a huge undertaking to make this from scratch. Yeah, or from. I shouldn't say. I see. Scratch ruined that idiom. Undertaking to try and build something from the ground up ourselves.
yeah.
But there are. I mean, it's a it's a common enough thing that people like to do that there are existing tools for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's ask the interns. Uh, are you, in general, Isla and David, you're into developing games? I know, David, it's true for you. Are there particular tools you guys want to learn in the process of developing games, or you don't care so much whether it's Scratch or um, building something from the ground up, or adjusting to a game engine? Do you have any preference for what skills you want to learn, or just you like to have the satisfaction of specifying and then developing a game?
I don't know. I always like the planning out process, and it really doesn't matter what game engine I use. But I think Unity would be like going over Unity more and more in depth would be I think more helpful to me. It's that's kind of more along the lines of what I want to get into is like 3D Unity games.
Okay, so that's a great comment, David. One of the beauties of the Unity game engine is that it has an easy transition to 3D graphics, or 3D graphics are inherent in Unity. So we have developed two games, no, Jacob, in Unity, and Brent, does it make sense to go back to the Unity engine? Also, the beauty of Unity is it gives us an opportunity to do some Java programming. No, Jacob? Isn't Unity?
Uh, the entrance to a different part of the website, if that's actually something that we're going to do. I don't believe you would do that with Unity, or at least it would be a bigger, it would be a more difficult task.
You'd want something small and 2D to make as an entrance to the website.
Jacob, you just summarized perfectly, at least in my mind, where I'd like to take this. I mean, I suppose we could go back to the game of the month idea that we started playing with a while back, Brent, and make it so that it's just a little series of mini games that you download. But I mean, we could go that route. Let's just develop a library of games. Any thoughts, Ayla, on how we're really talking about the business implications of what we're trying to do here, as well as the learning opportunities?
Well, I don't really have that much experience with games in general because I don't really play like much of them. But so I don't really know any kind of software that we could use. But I like the whole idea about library of games so that we don't just have one game offered, so that we could change it up so people get interested and want to come back and see a new game and play it, because I think that's important.
Yeah.
Game of the month, mini game of the month.
Good thought.
Mm-hmm. And we could simply make it the more you come back and the more you win, the more you try, whatever parameters we want to measure, that gives you access to different parts of the website. We could just say, here's a password because you've won 3 games. Remember this password and you can use it somewhere and build it yourself. To get something at a discounted price or to enter a room where there are special plans.
We can make it so people could submit games.
Oh, David, whoa. It would be really interesting to develop a series of game templates. And encourage people to submit their own games, either working from our template or even from the ground up. Jacob, I've got to yield to your good advice here. Inclined to try to present business goals. I think anything we do should relate. I think it's important that interns are able to say, I worked on a project that had a commercial value. That's an important goal. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay. Well, here's I guess I thought if we do want to go forward with the game thing, we certainly would want to build on top of an existing framework. So why don't we kind of as a first step, why don't we try to do a little bit of research into some different game development platforms, and so I've just been doing a little bit of just a quick little search for some engines that that work, especially with HTML5. So historically, making games in browser would mean you would pay for something expensive like Flash. But recently, so in the last few years, we have a cool open source tool that's supported by most modern browsers called HTML5 that lets us do a lot of these sorts of game, these sort of sophisticated animation and so forth in browsers. So what we're looking for is an HTML5 game development framework, and
may I add, Jacob, not to disrupt your train of thought, the kinds of games that we might like to build when we're researching these game engines. One is a trivia game, multiple choice trivia game possibility. Another could be a chance game.
Mm-hmm.
Just spin the wheel.
And that's the other sort of the other kind of option to proceed. And I'll defer to your judgment, John, on what you want to do with the project here.
Mm-hmm.
Is rather than I know there was comment that, well, if it's just a multiple choice test, it seems like a test. It doesn't seem like it's fun, like a game.
Right.
But that is something that we could do, kind of using what we already know, or at least what we've been learning in terms of web design and so forth.
Mm-hmm. I noticed in many of our workshops when, so for example, when we have a bunch of kids who have to line up to take turns flying their airplanes or line up to take turns, I ask a question. It's either a trivia question, how do you say red in Spanish, or what's 5 + 4 × 3? And I get the impression that many kids love those trivia questions. So I don't think it's necessarily, we should rule out multiple choice questions. And I think we can add graphics and sound effects and make even the trivia questions interesting enough so that that could be a starting point. That's probably the simplest game you can create, right? Multiple choice.
Yeah.
And then we can evolve it sort of like David lays out here to make it a series of rooms that you go through with a monster. So there's 4 or 5 trivia questions all associated with an environment. Do I interpret what you're speccing here, David, accurately?
Well, I think you just laid out a new idea, where instead of a platformer where you take around numbers and put them through monsters to get the correct answer to open doors, mm-hmm. I think one way to do what you're talking about is to kind of have it's kind of like a trivia battle between monsters, where you have to make sure you get more answers right than them in order to pass. And so you'll probably program monsters to get 1 answer right in the first area, 2 answers right in the second area, so it increases in difficulty. But then each area has its own little theme. So the first area might be all about jungle questions, so you'll ask about monkeys and trees and rains and all jungle things. And maybe next would be like space, so you ask about rocket scientists and stuff.
Cool.
So basically just be like different themed areas with different themed trivia come out right in order to beat the monster and progress into the next level.
Cool. I like your direction of trying to make this an environment of rooms and and monsters. It feels much more like a game than it does just here's the question and A, B, C, or D.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. And you know what we can do too is if we want to, I want to get to Daniel's comment here in a second. But what we may want to do is sort of, I'm not sure exactly where or how we would use this web page. Maybe it's just a part of the Build It Yourself site. But if we have sort of a game of the week or game of the month, page, we can create that page, and we can create maybe this first simple game, and then if as we learn more about some of these different tools, these game development platforms, or if maybe we do that in Intern Webcast, or maybe we don't. Maybe some interns want to make some want to put together some projects on their own time. We can have we can make the page where you would go to find the game of the week, and then that the games of the week can change from that point.
Jacob and
Dan,
Brent,
yeah.
What if we start off with something really simple I think we have to have the big picture in our rear view mirror, but what if we start off with something simple, maybe that we won't even use, just to get the flavor, to sort of direct our research on what framework to use, and get some experience using that framework. And then once we develop that simple game, we can try to evolve it into something like David described.
Great.
All right, I have an idea for a simple game.
Well, go for it, David.
So, while we're thinking about games, we want to make sure that players are going to play these simple games. And two of the most common ways I think you get people to play is one involves competition, and the other involves some sort of random element. So I think the best way to incorporate those into a simple game would be to have like a dice battle game where you're faced against a series of opponents, like just infinite amount of monsters that we can just draw up a lot, and then we can reuse some. It doesn't really matter as long as they come in quick succession. And you just roll a die for every monster, and if your number is bigger than theirs, then you beat them and go on to the next one, and it keeps track of your high score. But if you lose, then you have to start all over. It's like an infinite runner, except it's probability.
Infinite runner, but I'm sorry, but it has scalability, did you say, David?
Probability.
But infinite runner based on probability?
Basically, yeah.
Based on probability of your dice on infinite runner based on throw of the dice.
And there are some things we can do with that to make it a little bit more complicated if that's too easy, but yeah. Making you get coins, and then you can use the coins to buy a bigger die, which you have to get in order to beat later levels or something. I don't know.
Okay. Cool. Anyone want to add dimensions to this or propose another simple game? This sounds a little bit complicated to me, but Jacob, Brent, you would know better than I.
I think when you start to look at these existing sort of game development platforms, they each come with sort of example games, sort of sample games. So I think if you're, I think the simplest If you're looking for the simplest possible game, it may differ for each of these platforms, kind of depending on what their example is like.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably, that would be the first thing you learn with these platforms.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, are there specific suggestions that you can make, Brent or Jacob, for next steps, that especially steps that help us research either the game engine that Brent proposed or another game engine? What specifically would you suggest, Jacob?
Well, I think Brent's comment there is right, that we don't need to be limited to one platform necessarily if we're switching it up. And I think our first game, really, again, doing our first and then adding more complicated stuff later. We can do our little multiple choice trivia game at the beginning, and that we don't need a framework for, because that can just be HTML and CSS. And then we can add, and we'll see how many. I'll bet we have an to do for that, though. I mean, it sounds like it would be simple, but it's never that simple. I think we have enough there to keep all of us busy if we're working together. And then once that's in place, we'll in mind that that we may want, that eventually we'll want to be able to switch the games, switch in different games so that we can have a game of the month sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, Brent's right. Yeah, even just the math, and of course if this is going to have server side. Of course, I guess we can start with just a limited. I guess if we do just a limited number of questions, we can have them all. We don't need to do any server-side stuff yet, although eventually, maybe we want to look at that.
Mm-hmm. It would be nice to follow up on David's suggestion, submit your own game, submit your own trivia question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that would all require, a database and server-side code.
Right.
So we can start without that.
Yeah. Jacob, the more I hear you as we talk about this, it's a logical follow-up to what we've just been doing, CSS.
Yeah, that would be this trivia thing would be a more logical follow-up to sort of what we've been doing at least at this hour on Saturday. With certain terms of CSS and less and web styling.
Mm-hmm.
The JavaScript games would be fun. It's a little bit of a different, branching out to a little bit of a different topic there, which is okay. That's cool.
Right. So how long would you guess it would take to develop how many 1-hour sessions with maybe 1 or 2 hours of work during the week between sessions? Could we develop a trivia game engine in 3 weeks or 10 weeks?
I would. It's tough to say. I think it's a longer project. I don't think it's a 3-week project.
Mm-hmm. Would this be too boring to keep your interest, Daniel or David or Isla? Just building a trivia game engine? Or would you view this as a first step to getting into.
Daniel's excited.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not reading chat.
Thank you, Daniel.
I have to open up the chat.
I think if we keep a good pace and don't take a lifetime on it, then it will stay interesting. But once we start lagging behind on our duties and drag this out to a 3-month long project, then I don't think it's going to be interesting anymore. But,
right. Good point, David. Excellent
we'll try to
point.
keep learning new things too. If that's if we can.
Right.
We'll learn. I think we can lay out. We can learn how to lay out our trivia answers and make it responsive, and maybe we can find some application for parallax, because that's pretty cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Daniel's right too. That's a good thought.
In a maze, in a world. Okay, so Jacob, can you summarize what could be marching orders for next week?
Okay. Let's. Okay, so here's my thought. Okay. Actually, the more I think about this, the more I like this idea. So. Yeah. So yeah. Sorry. Thanks, Brent. So to recap quickly for Brent, what we're gonna start with a little trivia game that we'll just be able to do with with HTML and CSS and a little bit of JavaScript that we won't need a framework for. And then we'll keep in mind in the future, and that might be it sounds like that there's interest in it. There might be one of our next webcast series on building a platformer game or other genre of game with HTML5 on one of those frameworks. So here's my thought for how this game would be laid out, and we'll get your guys' feedback. Someone had the suggestion that there could be different areas, and you could visit the different areas to get different. Maybe there's different types of questions or different decor, like angle or depth, or so forth. So suppose we had we start with a map, and you go to you click on different parts of the map to go to that area, and when you win the trivia game in that area or in every area, maybe you unlock a final area to win the game, and that way we have we can. As we're dividing and conquering, we can we can have different interns kind of take a different area and do the style for that area. Does that sound like a reasonable way to divide up?
I love it. Everyone creates a page, an HTML page, and those pages are all linked by answering a question in one area, and going back to the main map, and then going to another intern's page. Mm-hmm. So you have ownership over your own trivia question page. Is that what you're suggesting, Jacob?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess first steps would be, we'll need to create. There's some JavaScript code before we get to the kind of the style that we've been learning. There's a little bit of JavaScript that we'll need to do, and it may be simple enough that we can do that together, during a webcast. And there may be, and I'll have to look. There may be some pre-existing, stuff online that we can build on top of that do sort of this similar sort of multiple choice type thing. Mm-hmm. We also, I think, the last time we did a JavaScript game, I think that was it was in our course on Bootstrap a while back. I'm not sure if any of these interns were there at that time or not, but we did kind of a memory matching game. I don't know if you remember that, John.
Yeah, of course I do.
But I think that a lot of the JavaScript is kind of similar to what we did there. So I think we can build on top of stuff we already have.
Okay. All right. So again, Jacob, this sounds logical to me. Is there a specific assignment we can give Isla, Daniel, and David for next week?
Yeah, let's tell you what. Why don't we, for now, because we a little bit of setup, I think, for our developers before we get into the actual code. But what if would everyone be okay with maybe trying to come up with some questions that we could use for the trivia? Maybe right now we could brainstorm sort of these different areas with these different themes for trivia questions. How about that?
Okay.
We can take just a couple minutes to try that. I mean, someone had the idea for like a jungle with animal themed questions.
Okay. Okay.
Are there other ideas?
A jungle with can you all see my screen?
Yeah. Yep, and in the chat box, David suggested Egyptian desert. Brent says space.
And what kind of questions would be in the Egyptian desert? Historical questions? Or
sports stadium? Yeah, I would suppose so.
Space. With what kind of questions would be in space? Navigation questions, or
could be science. Could be questions about space.
Yeah.
Or it could be something completely different.
Okay. So what if I like your suggestion.
Inside of a brain.
Wow, that's heavy. Creative sports. Wow, these are great ideas. Sports.
What's our target? I'm sorry. We'll talk about that in a minute. more brainstorming here. Or maybe we have enough.
Okay. Okay, so one of the assignments for next week is to make 3 trivia questions. David, I'm going to save this document. Can you be the keeper of this master document here. You
Yep,
set
I
this up
can-
in Google
I can
Docs?
Keep it organized and stuff.
Yep, and rewrite what I've done, and you in the future you be the keeper of our notes and our assignments.
All right.
What's our target age
Good
range?
question. Great question.
Target.
Okay. Trivia questions for ages 8 to 13. That's the range of our membership program.
Okay.
And I just say, in girls, I mean, it's obvious, but, well, it's not so obvious because very often something looks or sounds so boyish that girls don't want to go
Sure.
there. And so, Isla, we're counting on you to make this interesting to, half of the population.
Okay.
So the graphics, you're representing the better half of our population.
Sounds good.
By the way, Xiaofei is here. Many of you know Xiaofei, and she's listening in. Xiaofei is planning to be working as operations manager from San Francisco, where she lives now. And so say hello, everyone, to Xiaofei. And Xiaofei is going to be sitting in on these webcasts and following our progress and documenting our progress.
Hi everyone.
Cafe.
Can you hear?
Hold on, let me turn the camera on. It's all right. Great. Okay. More specifics for next week. 3 trivia questions. Email address so you can make sure she has access to. Any other questions we need to answer to make our trivia questions right. Great point. Okay. Great point. Mhm. If some of you want to take the initiative and just go for the gold, I mean, Daniel, you may be in a position where you can go so far as to create an example, make a trivia question, and show how you would execute it. David, you might be there also. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was actually going to make an example for the first the idea and also the trivia idea, because I'm very, I don't know, I read the text file you sent in the email last week, and I've been trying to make the game with only jQuery and some of that things.
Cool.
And I think I could make a very simple example, and I started to use drag and drop to shoot to the monsters.
Oh, neat.
And maybe if I if we don't make like a shooting very difficult example, I was thinking about you drag the number, you drop it in the monster, and then an animation starts where it shoots and something, and it's easier and all that stuff. And well, I
Yeah,
think
that's a cool
I
idea.
could show it to you next week.
Oh, Daniel, that
If
would be
it's
spectacular.
okay.
That's awesome.
Maybe you could take the lead in teaching us, a game engine that you propose. Daniel, I love that.
Well, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I hope I can show it to you next week. So,
Okay.
know,
Show it to us and teach us how to do it.
I think the teaching part will be difficult, but I will try
Okay.
because I'm
David,
not
are
very
you
good at teaching.
great? David, are you editing this document right now? I gather you are. Fantastic. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm happy if you guys are happy. Jacob, any other detailed suggestions? I love your offer, Daniel, to charge ahead. Brent, any thoughts before we adjourn? Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the idea too was, oh, sorry. Part of the idea too was to have just things that would appeal to both.
Yeah.
And try and as opposed to like football or or shopping, have things that appeal generally. And obviously those are there are boys and girls that are interested in football and in shopping, but just playing yeah
Great. The background,
keep things that
the background is
are of more general interest.
a little hard to hear, Brent. I'm going to turn your microphone off. Okay. I'll follow this up, David, with an email to you, and then maybe you can follow up with, I'll copy all the members that are just in the game development project. Shafe's made that really easy because she's put all of the contacts in Gmail. So we can create subgroups, and then you can just reply to that email with your updates, access to this Word doc, to this Google doc, and update it. Okay, guys, thanks for joining. Thanks for your good brainstorms. Onward. Have a good week.